Crowded malls, familiar stores. But what happens behind the scenes might terrify you. True stories of stalking, hiding, and chilling situations that will make you wonder, are you even safe in public places? It was a hot summer day when I arrived at the clothing store where I worked, located in a bustling mall. The mall was always lively, especially on weekends, with families, teenagers, and shoppers filling its corridors. I clocked in at noon, ready for my shift that would last until 8 p.m. Although the mall remained open until 9 p.m., our store had an earlier closing time that day. As I entered, I was greeted by the familiar hum of activity. The store was already crowded, with customers browsing through racks, trying on clothes, and lining up at the register. Saturdays were always hectic, with shoppers eager to find the best deals or spend their free time exploring the latest trends. From the start, my shift was busy. The steady stream of customers meant there was hardly a moment to pause. My tasks ranged from helping people find their sizes to tidying up after those who left clothes in disarray. It was a constant cycle of interaction and organization, which left little room to observe the store's surroundings thoroughly. Around 4 p.m., as I assisted a customer at the register, I noticed she seemed a bit uneasy. She leaned in slightly and in a low voice mentioned that there was a man in the store acting suspiciously. She described him as a white male, wearing a green sweatshirt and jeans, and about average height. Her concern was evident in her tone, and I thanked her for bringing it to my attention. After finishing with her, I informed a co-worker about the man's description. Though I couldn't immediately see anyone matching the description from where I stood, a sense of alertness took over. The racks and displays made it difficult to spot anyone unless they were in direct sight. I scanned the store discreetly, but saw no sign of the man. Not long after, another customer approached me, visibly more distressed. She explained that a man in a green sweatshirt had been following her around the store, making her uncomfortable. Her words added to my growing concern. It was clear I needed to find this man and address the situation. I stepped away from the register and began walking through the store, my eyes darting from rack to rack, scanning every aisle. The noise of the bustling store faded into the background as my focus sharpened. Eventually, I spotted him in the back corner near a display of sale items. Our eyes met for a brief moment before he quickly averted his gaze and turned away. As I moved toward him, he made a beeline for the exit and left the store. Relieved, I returned to my duties, hoping the situation was resolved. For the next few hours, the store remained busy, but the atmosphere felt less tense. Customers came and went, and the usual rhythm of a Saturday evening resumed. By 7 p.m., the crowd began to thin out, and the store became quieter, allowing us to start winding down. As the clock struck 8 p.m., my co-workers wrapped up their tasks and left, leaving me to handle the final closing duties. I pulled down the metal gate, signaling the end of the day's business. The store felt different now, emptier, quieter, almost serene compared to the earlier chaos. I began my routine of tidying up, sweeping the floor, and reorganizing displays to ensure everything was in order for the next day. As I made my way to the back of the store, the familiar hum of the mall outside faded into the background. The silence in the store was interrupted only by the soft rustling of clothes as I adjusted them on the racks. When I reached the back section, I was sorting through a rack when a movement caught my eye. Across the aisle, in the dimmer corner of the store, I saw a figure partially concealed behind a display. My breath caught as I realized it was the same man from earlier, still wearing the green sweatshirt. He was hiding, crouched behind the clothes, his eyes scanning the store. In that instant, he hadn't noticed me yet. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. I continued my task as if I hadn't seen him, moving methodically through the clothes. After a few moments, I slowly made my way to the front of the store, each step measured and deliberate, not wanting to draw attention to myself. Once at the front, I quickly grabbed my phone and texted Mall Security, describing the situation and requesting immediate assistance. The thought of leaving the store crossed my mind, but I felt an obligation to stay until help arrived. My position by the entrance allowed me to keep a safe distance from the man while keeping an eye on the store. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, every sound amplified in the quiet space. Suddenly, a noise came from the back. Something had been knocked over. My instincts kicked in, and I rushed to the gate, sliding it open just enough to slip through and quickly closing it behind me. As I secured the gate, I saw the man stepping into view, his expression tense. I walked briskly to the store next door, spotting a security guard approaching from down the hall. Waving him over, I explained what had happened, pointing out the man who had now exited the store and was attempting to walk away. The guard immediately pursued him, and after a short chase, managed to apprehend him. In the aftermath, I provided a detailed report of the incident to the security team. The adrenaline began to subside, replaced by a mix of relief and lingering unease. The thought of what could have happened had I not spotted him sent shivers down my spine. The realization that he had been hiding in the store, waiting while I was alone, was unsettling. Looking back, I'm grateful for the alert customers and the swift response from security. The experience left me more vigilant, a reminder of the importance of staying aware of one's surroundings, even in familiar places. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video to support us in continuing to publish stories. And don't forget to tell us your stories in the comments so we can show them in an upcoming video. A few years ago, I visited one of the largest shopping centers in the area, known for being a popular shopping destination. I was on a trip to a neighboring state to visit some relatives, and on the first day of my visit, I decided to explore this massive mall. Upon arrival, I started checking out some stores, then headed to the indoor entertainment area, which featured games and a fun atmosphere. I was enjoying my time, but I noticed something strange as I was leaving the games area and heading back to the shopping section. A man who seemed to be following me. This man started walking behind me in the main corridor of the mall for at least 5 minutes, then followed me up the escalator. I quickly realized he was following me. He wasn't even trying to hide it, he was walking just a few steps behind me. When I stopped to look at one of the stores, he stopped too, and when I continued walking, he did the same. He could have easily passed me, but he chose to stay behind me. As I was going up the escalator, I stood sideways to glance back and see who this man was. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, and his long blonde hair was tied in a ponytail. I went up to the 3rd floor of the mall, and he did the same. When I reached the 3rd floor, I left the escalator and started wandering around to find the food court. After locating it, I sat down to rest. I was hungry and wanted to eat, but not with this man behind me. I sat at a random table to see what he would do, and sure enough, he sat at the table next to me. Then he started looking around as if he wasn't following me. Did he really think he was being inconspicuous? Because he was failing miserably. After sitting there, browsing my phone and texting my friends for a while, I decided I'd had enough of this man. I stood up from my table and walked straight over to his. He didn't look at me until I stood directly in front of him for about 5 seconds. Then he looked up with a surprised expression on his face. I asked him, "Why are you following me?" He didn't even try to deny it or respond. He just stood up and walked away. I was surprised by his strange behavior, but I watched him walk away until he was out of sight. At that moment, I was glad he was gone, and I was able to order food and eat in peace. After that, I wandered around a bit more and bought some items from the stores, mostly souvenirs and a hat. By the time I finished shopping and exploring the mall, I was tired from all the walking and had completely forgotten about the man. I left the mall through an overhead walkway and started walking to the parking garage where my car was parked. I planned to return to the hotel, which was about a 10-minute drive away. And the next day, I was going to visit my friends. I was on the wrong level of the parking garage and had to take the stairs down to the correct one. As I started descending and turned the corner, I saw the man again standing by the stairs. He looked at me as I passed, then started following me once more. This time I was more concerned because I was no longer inside the mall with lots of people around. I turned to him and said, "Are you following me again?" He didn't respond, just kept staring at me. Finally he said, "No, my car's over there." I didn't believe him, especially since he had been standing in the stairwell until I passed, then suddenly decided to leave. I didn't say anything and continued walking to my car. He was still following me, about 40 feet behind. Finally, I found my car. I approached it cautiously and only unlocked it when I was right next to it. The man walked to the third car down from mine, but didn't get in. He just stood by the door. As soon as I opened the back door to put my shopping bags inside, the man suddenly started running toward me. I didn't have time to get into the driver's seat because he was running so fast and caught me off guard. Instead, I jumped into the back seat and started pressing the lock button on my key repeatedly. I heard the small beep indicating the car was locked, and just 3 seconds later, the man reached my car. He was looking at me through the window just a few feet away. I felt terrified because we were in an almost empty parking garage and there was no one around. I crawled to the front seat and tried to start the car. I heard him say from outside, "You're not going anywhere." He moved to the front of the car, and when he saw me trying to start it, he moved to the back, perhaps to block me in. There were cars parked on both sides of me, and in front of me was a concrete barrier, so my only option was to reverse. The man stood behind the car, looking at me through the rear window. After a few seconds, he said, "Get out of the car." I didn't know what to do, but I knew I wasn't going to get out. He kept standing there, and I was afraid he might try to break the windows. In a panic, I started honking the horn repeatedly, hoping someone would hear what was happening. After about 20 seconds of continuous honking, the man finally walked away. As soon as he did, I reversed the car and quickly drove off. I was worried he might follow me in his car, but I don't think he was parked near me. I made it back to the hotel safely. I don't understand how he knew where I had parked. It seemed like he was waiting for me in the stairwell. Maybe it was a coincidence, but when I told my friends what happened, they were concerned and decided to accompany me on my next visit to the mall. Thankfully, no one followed us. A few years ago, I was shopping at a large shopping center. I was buying a lot of things and spent a long time there. I think I visited about 10 different stores, and I don't even want to think about how much money I spent. However, the real story began after I finished shopping. I left the mall late at night when it was much quieter. Of course, when I arrived in the morning, the huge parking lot was crowded, and I had to park far in the back. After leaving the mall, I looked around for a moment, then finally found my car. I walked toward it, and as I got closer, I saw a man approaching from another direction. The man was wearing a gray jacket with his hands in his pockets. Honestly, he seemed suspicious to me right away. I reached my car door and was about to open it when the man approached me. He said, "Hello," so I turned to face him. He then told me he was sorry to bother me, but was wondering if I could give him a ride. I immediately replied that I was sorry, but couldn't help him. The man seemed disappointed by my response, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me. I noticed that his left hand stayed in his jacket pocket the entire time. This might sound crazy, but I was afraid he might be carrying something there, especially since he was gesturing with his right hand while speaking, but his left hand remained still in his pocket. After the man stood there without responding to me for about 10 seconds, I opened my car door, put the bags inside, and got in. The man stayed there, watching me as I started the engine and locked the doors. The situation was extremely awkward. Drove away, feeling relieved to be out of that situation. Part of me felt guilty for not helping the man if he really needed a ride, but I knew helping him would have been a crazy idea. I left the parking lot and headed to the main road. Like the parking lot, the roads that were busy in the morning were now much quieter. I'd been driving for about 5 minutes on my way home, with about 10 minutes left, when I noticed a car speeding up behind me. I expected it to pass me, but it got very close to my car and stayed behind me. I was in the right lane, and there was an open lane next to me. I wondered why it didn't pass me. Finally, I had to take the next exit to get home. When I did, the car behind me did the same. That's when I realized that whoever was behind me was following me, and I started thinking about who it could be. The car behind me was small and looked somewhat old, maybe from the late 90s or early 2000s. I continued driving home, hoping the car would stop. Then the car started flashing its headlights intermittently. I turned again to get home, and the car behind me did the same. While driving, I noticed that I would pass a local police station. At the last moment, I turned into the parking lot there. When I did, the car behind me did the same. But as I parked my car in front of the building, I saw the car turn around and leave. I was overjoyed to see it leave. After parking my car, I got out and went into the police station to tell them what had happened. I answered some questions for a few minutes, but unfortunately, I couldn't provide much help. I gave a description of the man, but I didn't get his license plate number. After that, I was able to get home safely. I think the man was trying to rob people leaving the mall. I'm not entirely sure why he chose me, but I guess carrying several shopping bags made him think I had money. Either way, I'm glad I got away from him. Last year, I went shopping at a mall near my house. This mall is one of the largest in the area, known for being constantly updated and featuring every store and restaurant you could need. It even has a movie theater connected to it. To give you some background about my story, I'm a 20-year-old woman. I was home for the summer, staying with my parents. There were sales at 2 different stores I frequently visited at the mall, so I decided to go shopping. I asked a friend if she wanted to join me, but she was busy, so I went alone. I arrived at the mall around 11 a.m. It was quite busy, and after visiting 2 stores and buying a few things, I went into a shoe store. Once inside, I was just browsing around. Then, an employee approached me. He introduced himself as Ahmed and told me to let him know if I needed any help. He had brown hair, looked to be in his mid-30s, and was above average in height. I told him I was fine, but he started telling me about all the deals they had and asked what I was looking for. After I told him I was just browsing, he asked about my style and preferences. He came across as a salesman, trying hard to make a sale. But things quickly took a turn. I bluntly told him I wasn't planning to buy anything right now. In fact, I had already spent more than I wanted to that day. He said, "Okay," and I thought he would leave, but instead, he asked if I studied in the area. I told him which university I attended, then started walking toward the exit. But Ahmed followed me. He asked why I was leaving so soon, and said he wanted to get to know me better. This behavior felt creepy to me. I left the store and should have gone home right then, but I enjoy shopping. So I went into another nearby store to browse. I stayed there for about 20 minutes, then left. As I was walking down one of the mall's main hallways, I saw Ahmed again. This time, he was walking in the opposite direction and wasn't looking at me. I figured he might have just finished his shift or was on a break. Either way, I didn't want to see him. I looked away and tried to walk behind some other people, so he wouldn't notice me. Once I thought he had passed, I looked back to make sure, but I saw him staring right at me. I quickly looked away and picked up my pace. Now I was really heading home. I walked down the hallway until I reached the entrance I had come in through, then went to my car and left. I drove home and spent the rest of the evening with my family watching a movie. I went to my room to sleep around midnight, but before trying to fall asleep, I turned off the lights and turned on Netflix. About 30 minutes later, around 12:30 a.m., I heard a noise outside my bedroom window. It sounded like a tree branch scraping against the window, but it felt unnatural. The curtains covered most of the window, but I could see part of the outside. When I looked, I didn't see anything, but when I turned my attention back to the TV, I heard the same noise again. This time, I saw something pass by the window. It was just for a moment, but I knew something was there. It was unlikely to be an animal. I paused the show and stared at the window. There was nothing there for about 10 seconds. Then I got up to close the curtains. As I took 2 steps toward the window, I saw someone appear. It was Ahmed. I jumped back in shock. How and why was he outside my bedroom window? When he saw me, he looked surprised and ducked out of sight. I kept looking out the window. I wanted him to leave, and I could tell he was hiding to stay out of view. After a few seconds, he reappeared and looked in again. Then he knocked on the window. I screamed as loud as I could and said I was calling the police. Ahmed stayed at the window and put his hand over his mouth, signaling for me to be quiet. My parents must have heard me screaming because my dad knocked on my bedroom door. I opened it, and when he came in, he saw Ahmed outside the window. My dad immediately ran out of the room, shouting. I grabbed my phone and called the police. My dad chased after Ahmed, and a short time later, I heard the screech of tires. Unfortunately, he had gotten away. My dad came back inside and said he had been within about 10 feet of catching him. It was probably a good thing he didn't, though, because I don't know how dangerous Ahmed was, and it was best for my dad not to confront him, even though I'm sure my dad would have won in a fight. The police arrived shortly after. I was able to give them a detailed description of Ahmed, including where he worked, and that was enough for them. They managed to catch him, and I feel much safer now.